All right, in this lesson, we're going to look at factoring polynomials that are x to the fourth equations, but they look very similar. And actually, the second one's an x to the fifth, so it's going to be kind of a similar deal, but we'll talk about that. All right, so for this first one, what we typically have done, so I'm just going to do a quick side example. I want to write the same thing, but x squared minus 13x plus 36. It's very similar, but it's a different equation. This one's an x squared, the other one's an x to the fourth. If we were to factor this, we know it'd be x times x would give us x squared, and then we're looking for factors of 36. So 36 is 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 6 and 6. And so we would want to choose two factors that will multiply to positive 36 and add to negative 13. And that would be negative 4 and negative 9. All right, so that's how we factored it if it was an x squared. But how do we do it if it's an x to the fourth? Well, the answer is, surprisingly, pretty much the same. We're going to set up our parentheses. But instead of x and x, like we do when we're looking for x squared, since we're looking for x to the fourth, it's going to be x squared, x squared. And then we're going to, once again, look at what are the factors of 36. We already did this. That add to negative 13. So it's minus 4, minus 9. So we have our two factors. If you're ever unsure, just multiply it out. We've got x squared times x squared, that's x to the fourth. We have x squared times negative 9, that'd be negative 9x squared. We have negative 4 times x squared, which is negative 4x squared. We have negative 4 times negative 9, which is positive 36. And that would indeed give us our original equation. So we did factor it correctly. Whenever you are unsure if you're factoring it correctly, just multiply it out, FOIL it out, and see if you get the original. So then it's just like other factorings. We do x squared minus 4 equals 0. X squared minus 9 equals 0. We solve those two. We should get 4 answers because we're dealing with an x to the fourth equation. So plus 4 over here. X squared equals 4. Square root both sides, and we get x equals positive or negative 2. On the other one, we are going to add 9 to both sides. We get x squared equals 9. Square root both sides, and we get x equals positive or negative 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. So we got 4 answers. That's what we should have gotten. And yeah, so this one, if we graph it, it's always good to kind of rehash on what's going to happen on the graph. It's going to cross at 2, at negative 2, at 3, and at negative 3. X to the fourth equations, if they're positive, they look like a W. If they're negative, they look like an M. And when I say if they're positive, I mean the x to the fourth number out in front would be positive. And in this case, it is. It's 1. So we're going to look like a W. It's going to come through negative 3, turn, go through negative 2, turn, go through 2, turn, go through 3, and going to look something like that. All right, next one. If you want, I would encourage you to pause it, see if you can figure this one out on your own. If you can't, that's fine, but try it and then unpause and see if you got it right. So on this one, first thing I notice is each of these has an x with it, so I'm going to factor out an x. And when I do, I get x to the fourth minus 9x squared plus 8. And at this point, it's a lot like the previous problem. So let's see here. This is going to be x squared, and we're looking for numbers that multiply up to 8. So we've got 1 and 8, 2 and 4. And we want them to add to negative 9. So I'm thinking we'd have minus 1, minus 8. So we have 3 factors here. We're going to set each of these 3 factors equal to 0 and solve them. It would be x equals 0, x squared minus 1 equals 0, and x squared minus 8 equals 0. The first one's done. It's just 0, so we're good there. This one, we're going to add 1 to both sides. We get x squared equals 1. And then we square root both sides, and we get x equals plus or minus 1. So we have 3 answers so far. We've got 0, 1, and negative 1. On the other one, we're going to add 8 to both sides. We get x squared equals 8. We square root both sides, and we get x equals plus or minus the square root of 8. So the square root of 9 would be 3. That means the square root of 8 is probably around like 2.8 or something like that. Typically, we wouldn't leave it as the square root of 8. We would break that down. It would be x equals plus or minus 8 is 4 times 2. And so it'd be plus or minus 2 root 2, which is approximately 2.8 plus or minus. I'm not 100% confident it's 2.8, but I'm just talking about if we're graphing this, we know it's going to be just a little bit to the left of 3. So, ooh, that's an ugly graph. Let's try that again. Here we go. That's better. Okay. So 0, 1, negative 1. Let's see here. I don't like those dots where they're at. Let's do that again. There's 1. The negative 1 should be spaced pretty evenly, so that's better. And then about 2.8-ish, so this would be 2 root 2, and then negative 2 root 2. All right, so for an x to the 4th, we said it looks like a w. For an x to the 5th, it's just going to have another turn. It's going to look something like that. And then this is a positive x to the 5th, so it's going to look like that. All right, so through this dot, through this dot, through this dot, through this dot, and we turn, and boom. There's our equation, or there's our graph. All right, so that is it for this lesson, factoring these types of problems.